He thought it was just another routine ride home, a quiet moment to clear his head after sealing the biggest deal of his career. But the second the door clicked shut, a small voice broke the silence. "Shut up." Those two words weren't loud, but they cut deeper than any insult he'd ever heard. The speaker? A little black girl, no older than 7, staring at him with eyes that carried a story far too heavy for her age. What could make a child speak with such defiance and such pain? Daniel Price wasn't just any CEO. He was the kind who believed he would earned every bit of his success. Raised in a small town, he worked his way from a cramped studio apartment to the corner office of a glass high-rise. That night, he left the boardroom feeling untouchable, fresh off signing a multi-million-dollar contract. His sleek black sedan waited outside, the leather seats still carrying the faint smell of newness. For Daniel, rides home were his sanctuary, a rare moment of calm between endless meetings and phone calls. He was already thinking about the champagne waiting in his penthouse fridge when his driver pulled up to the curb. But this ride wouldn't be like the others. From the corner of his eye, he noticed something unusual in the back seat, a booster seat, slightly worn, and a small backpack with frayed straps. The faint sound of humming drifted in the air. Daniel didn't yet realize it, but the next few minutes in that car would unravel everything he thought he knew, about himself, about success, and about the world he lived in. The humming stopped the moment Daniel slid into the back seat. He glanced over, and there she was, a little black girl, knees pulled to her chest, her tiny fingers gripping that frayed backpack like it was her only lifeline. Her eyes met his for just a second, before darting away. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could get a word out, her small voice cut through the air. "Shut up." It wasn't playful. It wasn't rude for the sake of it. It was sharp, urgent, like a warning. Daniel blinked, unsure whether to be offended or concerned. "Excuse me?" he asked, his voice carrying the authority he was used to commanding. She didn't answer. She just kept staring out the window, jaw tight, as if bracing for something. A question burned in his mind. Why was she even in the car? His driver, a middle-aged man named Robert, didn't offer any explanation, just kept his eyes locked on the road. The air in the car felt heavier with every passing second. As they turned down a quiet street, Daniel noticed another car creeping up behind them, headlights off, close enough for the shadow of its hood to flicker across the back seat. "Robert, you see that?" Daniel asked. Robert's voice was calm, but too calm. "Just sit tight, sir." The girl's grip on her backpack tightened. Daniel's heart began to race, not because of the car behind them, but because of the way the girl's eyes shifted, not toward the road, but toward him, like he was part of the problem. Then, without warning, she whispered something so soft, he almost didn't catch it. "They always come." Before he could ask what she meant, the trailing car accelerated, pulling alongside them. In the split second before it matched their speed, Daniel saw the passenger, white man, mid-40s, holding a phone out the window, filming. The expression on his face wasn't curiosity. It was disdain. The girl turned away, burying her face in the backpack. Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears. This wasn't some random coincidence. This was targeted. But targeted at who? Her? Him? Both? He leaned forward, trying to get answers, but Robert's voice snapped back, low, firm, almost a command. "Don't say a word." The black sedan surged forward, making a sudden turn into an unlit alley. The trailing car slowed, but didn't stop watching. As their headlights faded in the rear view, Daniel realized the truth was far more dangerous than he'd imagined, and he wasn't sure he wanted to know the rest. The sedan rolled to a stop in the shadows of the alley. The hum of the engine was the only sound, until the little girl finally looked at him again. "They think you're my—" she began, but her voice cracked. She swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "They think you took me." Daniel froze. The trailing car. The man filming. It all snapped into place. They hadn't been watching her for protection. They were building a story. A story where a wealthy white CEO was caught with a black child in the back seat. No questions asked. No truth required. Before he could respond, blinding beams of light flooded the alley. The sound of tires skidding, doors slamming, heavy boots pounding the pavement. "Step out of the vehicle! Hands where we can see them!" Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs. He opened his mouth to explain, but the little girl's hand shot out, gripping his sleeve, not in fear of him, but for him. "Don't move," she whispered. "They won't listen." Multiple flashlights converged on his face, their glare hot and unyielding. He could hear the metallic click of a safety being released. In that instant, Daniel understood. This wasn't about evidence, reason, or truth. It was about perception, and the perception was already decided. He slowly raised his hands, feeling the weight of every unseen camera, every whispered judgment already forming beyond this alley. Somewhere deep inside, a part of him broke, not from fear of what they might do, but from realizing how many times this had happened to others, without anyone to stop it. The next words he heard would decide everything. "Sir, step forward, now!" The officers surrounded the car, barking orders with clipped precision. Robert tried to speak, but one of them shut him down with a sharp gesture. Daniel was pulled aside, patted down, questioned. His success, his suit, his status meant nothing here. The little girl sat on the curb, her small frame dwarfed by the flashing red and blue lights. Eventually, after a flurry of radio calls and hushed exchanges, the truth came out. The girl was Robert's niece, picked up after school when her mother was delayed at work. She had told Daniel to shut up because she'd seen too many times how speaking, even politely, could be twisted, escalated, and used against someone who looked like her. The officers left without apology, without acknowledgement of the fear they'd created. Daniel stood there in the dark, his tailored jacket heavy on his shoulders, realizing this was a reality he had never been forced to see until now. He went home that night, but he wasn't the same man who had stepped into that car. The deal he'd closed, the wealth he'd built, all of it felt smaller in the shadow of what he'd witnessed. And he knew. For millions, this wasn't a single frightening night. It was life. If a man with everything could be stripped of dignity in seconds just by association, what chance did those without power ever have? This wasn't just her story, or his. It's the story of a system that sees some people as threats before it sees them as human. The question is, how many more times will this scene play out before we decide it's the last?